The day the Galactic Council voted to expel humanity from the stars was supposed to be the end. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood before the towering alien delegates, her head held high even as the verdict echoed through the crystalline chamber. The Zaithrani, with their luminous blue skin and 6 eyes, had called humans primitive. The Korath, massive beings of living stone, had deemed them too aggressive. The Veluxi, insectoid creatures with minds like supercomputers, had labeled them emotionally unstable and therefore dangerous. 12 species had cast their votes. 12 species had said no to humanity. "You are hereby stripped of your travel rights," announced High Chancellor Mirith, a Zithrani elder whose voice carried the weight of 1,000 years. "Your colonies beyond Sol will be reclaimed. Your ships will be grounded. Return to your home system and remain there. The galaxy has no place for your kind." Elena wanted to argue. She wanted to remind them of the medical advances humanity had shared, the art and music that alien species had secretly collected, the philosophers whose ideas had sparked debates across 100 worlds. But she said nothing. Pride kept her silent. That was 50 years ago. In the decades that followed, humanity did not wither. They did not collapse into despair or fade into extinction as many council species had predicted. Instead, they looked inward. They looked at each other, and they began to build. The first fusion reactor that could power an entire continent came online within 5 years of the exile. It was not born from alien technology. Humans had been barred from keeping any of that. It came from human minds working together with a desperation and determination that the galaxy had never witnessed. 10 years after the exile, humanity cracked the code of quantum computing. Machines that could process information faster than the Veluxi hive minds became common in human laboratories. Scientists shared their findings openly, freely, without the corporate greed that had once slowed progress. 20 years after the exile, the first-generation ship was completed. Not a vessel for war, but for exploration. Humans sent it toward the edges of known space, past the borders that the Council had tried to cage them within. The Council noticed, but did nothing. Let the primitives wander into the void, they thought. Let the darkness swallow them. 30 years after the exile, humanity developed shields that could withstand the heat of a star. They built habitats inside asteroids. They terraformed moons with techniques so advanced that even the oldest council species could not understand the science behind it. And then the swarm came. Nobody knew where they originated. The Veluxi detected them first, an endless wave of biological ships emerging from the darkness between galaxies. They consumed everything in their path. Planets, stations, entire star systems were stripped bare within days. The swarm did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply devoured. The Korath fell first. Their stone bodies, which had withstood weapons of every kind, were dissolved by the acidic secretions of swarm soldiers. Their homeworld, ancient and proud, became a lifeless husk in 3 standard weeks. The Veluxi tried to outthink the enemy. Their hive minds calculated trillions of strategies, predicted countless outcomes. But the swarm had no strategy to predict. They were pure hunger, pure instinct, and the Veluxi queen worlds burned one by one. The Zithrani attempted diplomacy. Their ships approached swarm formations with translation devices active, with offerings of peace. Those ships were never heard from again. Within 2 years, half the council species had been reduced to refugee fleets. The great civilizations that had looked down upon humanity were now scattered, broken, and dying. Their technologies, so superior in their minds, proved useless against an enemy that cared nothing for their achievements. High Chancellor Mirith sat in his personal shuttle, watching the latest reports. His homeworld was gone. His family was gone. The council chamber where he had once pronounced humanity unworthy now drifted as debris in the cosmic wind. He was an old man with nowhere to go and no hope left. Except one. The human system. Sol. the primitives they had exiled. The refugee fleet jumped toward Earth, expecting to find a backward civilization huddled on a dying planet. What they found made Mirith weep. Earth was transformed. Green forests covered continents that had once been scarred by human industry. Massive orbital stations circled the planet like protective guardians. Ships of designs never before seen patrolled the system in organized formations. And beyond Earth, every planet and moon showed signs of habitation. The fleet was intercepted before they could approach Earth. "Identify yourselves," came a human voice over the communication channel. Mirith activated his translator. His hands were trembling. "This is High Chancellor Mirith of the Galactic Council. We request sanctuary." There was a long pause. Then a different voice responded. It was older, female, and carried a weight of memory. "Chancellor Mirith, this is Elena Vasquez." "I remember you." Mirith closed his eyes. Of course, the human ambassador he had personally banished. The woman whose dignity he had stripped away before the entire galaxy. "Ambassador Vasquez," he said quietly, "I understand if you wish to turn us away. We have no right to ask anything of your people." Another pause. Longer this time. "Bring your ships to the following coordinates. You will be escorted to temporary housing on Mars. Food and medical care will be provided." Mirith could not believe what he was hearing. You will help us?" "After everything, we will help everyone," Elena replied. "That is what makes us human." The refugees were settled on Mars, in domed cities that could have housed billions. They were given food synthesized from pure energy, medicine that could heal wounds the Council's technology could not touch, and shelters that kept them safe from the radiation and cold of space. But the swarm was still coming. Within months, the last free Council species arrived at Sol. The Thelani, aquatic beings who could survive only in pressurized water environments, were given entire ocean habitats on Europa. The Nightkin, shadow creatures who feared light, were housed in the underground caves of Titan. Every species, no matter how strange, was accommodated. And then the human military began to mobilize. Mirith was invited to observe the preparations. He expected to see the primitive weapons humanity had possessed 50 years ago. Projectile launchers, chemical explosives, crude nuclear devices. What he saw instead shattered every assumption he had ever held. Human warships were works of art and terror combined. Their hulls were coated with living metal that could repair damage in real time. Their weapons fired concentrated beams of dark energy that could tear through swarm bioships like paper. Their shields were not energy barriers, but fields of distorted space-time that redirected attacks into other dimensions. "How?" Mirith asked Admiral Chun, the human officer assigned to brief him. "How did you develop all of this?" Admiral Chun smiled. It was not a proud smile or a mocking one. It was tired. "You gave us nothing," she said. "You took our colonies, our stations, our ships. You left us with only ourselves, and that was enough. Humans have always been strongest when we have nothing but each other to rely on. We built this with our hands, our minds, and our refusal to accept limits." The fleet launched 3 days later. 12,000 human vessels against the swarm armada that had consumed half the galaxy. The battle lasted 9 hours. The swarm had numbers. The swarm had hunger. The swarm had the bodies of 1 trillion consumed beings driving them forward. But the humans had something else. They had fury tempered by patience. They had technology born from desperation. And they had soldiers who had grown up being told they were lesser, who had trained knowing one day they would have to prove the universe wrong. Admiral Chun commanded the flagship personally. She watched the tactical displays as human fighters dove into swarm formations, their pilots executing maneuvers that the Veluxi hive minds would have calculated as impossible. She watched as human battleships anchored themselves against swarm dreadnoughts, pouring fire into the enemy until nothing remained but ash and silence. When the last swarm ship fell, the human fleet stood battered but unbroken. They had lost ships and crews. They had paid a heavy price. But they had won. Mirith watched the battle reports in stunned silence. Around him, the refugees of a dozen species wept with relief and shame. They had called these beings primitive. They had cast them aside like garbage, and humanity had saved them anyway. Elena Vasquez met with Mirith one final time. She was old now, her hair white and her movements slow. But her eyes still held that same dignity, that same quiet strength. "Why?" Mirith asked. "After how we treated you, after everything, why did you save us?" Elena considered the question for a long moment. "Because that is what it means to be human," she said finally. "We remember our wounds, but we do not let them poison us. We know what it is to be rejected, to be dismissed, to be told we are not good enough. And because we know that pain, we refuse to inflict it on others. Even those who inflicted it on us." Mirith bowed his head. "We were wrong about your species." "Yes," Elena agreed. "You were. Will you rejoin the council? Help us rebuild?" Elena shook her head. "No. Humanity has moved beyond the need for your approval. We will always be here, watching the stars, ready to help those in need. But we will never again ask for permission to exist." She turned and walked away, leaving Mirith alone with his thoughts and his shame. In the years that followed, the galaxy rebuilt. The council species established new worlds, new governments, new alliances. And always, at the edge of known space, humanity stood guard. They asked for nothing. They demanded no apologies, no reparations, no recognition. They simply existed, a reminder to every species that sometimes the beings you look down upon are the ones who will lift you up when you fall. The children of the galaxy grew up with new stories. Not of the primitive humans who had been exiled in disgrace, but of the silent guardians who had saved them from extinction. They learned that strength was not measured in ancient technology or superior evolution. It was measured in the choice to help those who had harmed you, to forgive those who had wronged you, and to stand tall when everyone else expected you to kneel. And somewhere in the vastness of space, on a small blue planet orbiting an average yellow star, humanity continued to grow. They had been cast aside, forgotten, written off as a failed experiment of evolution. But they had proven something important. They had proven that the measure of a civilization is not what it does when it has power, but what it does when power is taken away. And in that darkness, humanity had found a light within themselves that no one could ever extinguish. The galaxy had learned its lesson. They had learned never to underestimate the species that refused to die, refused to hate, and refused to be anything less than what they truly were: human.